Oh, salut! I am the Rasta Witch. Here's where we learn the way of the Yansui Rasta, which is to say, my kind of Ital. Please subscribe and begin your own kind of Yansui witchcraft. All roads lead to Rome. Home. Yes, I have to wear my glasses to read that. I have it written on the wall up there. Um, okay, so there's something very important to bring up now is in Mr. Armstrong's teachings is it's not just about in the U.S. and Britain prophecy. It talks about why there would need to be 2,000 years uh, for before the last days happen. There's also the reason to believe today's the last days is just the logic of the it matches the I mean only now do we have the internet and the information to really do that, to move on to the next thing. um, in the past we would have had to move on to another like dictatorship type thing, but now only now do we have really the means to really outgrow war and move on to in a significant way, and that's what this is about. The end of the Bible, the end of these things, and moving on to a more significant way. So another big one is what Herbert Armstrong calls the apostasy, and that's what this is about. So if you read, again, you can read all Mr. Armstrong's books for free online. I've got a whole bunch of these. This one has 6 different books in it. I just got a whole stack of Herbert Armstrong books. But if you read his book called True History of the True Church, and he also has like an over an hour long documentary on it where he talks about it. It's really well done. He goes over how what he's calling the true church. So like Mr. Armstrong led the church, that what was called the Church of God, and who kept the biblical holidays and not Babylon's holidays. Didn't do Christmas and Easter and stuff, but did the Passover and the days of unleavened bread and the Day of Atonement and all that stuff. I did the Sabbath on Saturday and only ate biblically clean meats and didn't care how Babylon did it, but did it just like it says in the Bible. And in his book, The True History of the True Church of God, the True Church, he goes over the basic things that the church would need to have in it to be the true church, or to you and I, the church that actually matches the description in the Bible. That it was ongoing. There always was a group of people doing all of those things from the time of Jesus all the way up into Mr. Armstrong's time, and it continued with his church, the Church of God, which he didn't really found, but he made it more right so that it matches this description, and proves that there's that it's just more proof that there's always been an ongoing thing. So that it's like, for example, I grew up in the Mormon Church. The Mormon Church teaches that right after the story of the New Testament ends, that there was an apostasy. We know that they were martyred and that a whole bunch of bad things happened, but they believe that nothing good happened until Joseph Smith, in like 18 whatever year that was, not too long ago. That whole they believe the apostasy was that whole entire time, like 2,000 years, less than 2,000 years in that case. But that doesn't really make sense because it would need it would need to for one thing. Well, that's another subject. It would need to take 2,000 years, so it's being more consistent with the Bible to believe that. But there still would need to be a falling away. Second Thessalonians, and then you know how to tell when a book's from the Old Testament or the New Testament, right? The Old Testament, you got the 5 books of Moses: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth. Oh, dang it. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Sorry. Those are the books of Moses. Then every book after that is the name of a person, Uh, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges. Oh, Judges, no. Ruth. But if you've read the Bible, you know Judges, because it was a time when they used judges instead of a king. Judges, Ruth, Kings. Well, Kings was it's just talking about the same thing. Where they finally got a king and they had kings. Kings, Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms, Proverbs. So not always. Ecclesiastic, Songs of Solomon. Like for the most part, the New Testament ones, they're names of people. They're names of a person. And supposedly the book was written by that person, which is never the case. But in the New Testament, we have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the 4 Gospels. But then all the other books are epistles, are letters written to people, so that they tend to be things like Hebrews, and this is Thessalonians, which are a people. Corinthians. I'm looking through it. Romans. See, those are all people. See? But it's not always the case either. There's the Acts, there's the book of Revelations, there's Peter and 2 Peter and Timothy and 2 Timothy and like it's not always true, James, but anyway, so this is 2 Thessalonians. Is there any book in the Old Testament that's the name of a people? I don't think so. You can just tell right away. Thessalonians. Oh, that's a people, therefore it must be the New Testament. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, and there's only 3 chapters in that book. It's a short book. Verse 3, it says, and it's talking about the last days. The trick to knowing when it's talking about the last days is knowing all the names that it calls the last days. The last days, the end times, the great and dreadful day of the Lord. What's another one? I must be missing some, but that's generally it. Verse 3, let no man deceive you by any means. So it's talking about, so again, the Christians, Jesus and the Christians, when you're reading the New Testament, realize they didn't think it was going to happen 2,000 years later. They thought this whatever was supposed to happen, they believed it was going to happen like right after this, right after the book of the New Testament ends. So they're saying, when Thessalonians, who does Thessalonians? It's Paul. When Paul tells the Thessalonians, I just looked at the first of it. If you ever wondered how you do that, like you don't need to look it up. See, it says at the very first, it says the first epistle of Paul, the apostle, to the Thessalonians. I recommend that you get used to understanding the Bible by yourself, so you don't need to always, and trust yourself, So he's talking about soon. He's saying, let no man deceive you. When he means you, he means you guys. He doesn't mean your descendants 2,000 years later. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. So when at this point it's perfectly clear. So you have to remember, like, they thought it was going to happen 2,000 years later, and ever since there's always been a true church, but there's probably always been someone that said, sometime soon in your lifetime it's going to happen. There's for the last 2,000 years there's probably always been a preacher saying, that the apocalypse is coming. The apocalypse is going to be really, really bad this time. But that's the whole point of Selassie, and that's what a lot of the Bible historians and really most everybody nowadays misses, is what's the point? The reason that Selassie comes as the next advent of Jah and the character of his kingship is to fulfill the rest of the scripture, so that the whole thing, the whole book, the teachings and everything, gets to save face, you know, and that's why the Lion of Judah, they would be sealed until the time of the end. So it wasn't, you weren't, if this was none of this, and the apocalypse was started to be taught back in Daniel's day, which is the way in the Old Testament, way before this. And the book of Revelations is just a spin-off of that, you know. So these things are known, you know. I mean, back then, this is, you know, it's not just a Christian thing. There's always been this belief that this moment's going to happen, you know, this the last day is this dreadful day, and that it would involve this beast, you know, the son of perdition and this man of sin. That these concepts have been around since Daniel. That was a long time ago. So no, it wasn't originated by the Christians. So but they thought that it was going to happen right after that. So when it says, I just said, except there come a falling away first, many religions, including Herbert Armstrong calls that the apostasy. And so who opposeth and exalteth himself, this is the next verse, above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he, as God sitteth in the temple of God, sheweth himself that he is God. Remember ye not. Anyway, so it's, the point is that for things to match, and that's kind of the point of not my teachings really, but of the things that I'm talking about, is that you know, I'm claiming that that what I'm telling you is a better match than anyone else's, you know, but I don't ever claim to know everything. You know, there might be other things that other people have thought of that matches perfectly well. For all I know, I don't know if it matters even. But anyway, it also has to match your personal experiences and match history and everything, and be relevant instead of just some, you know, arbitrary thing. You know, saying this is true because I say so, and it's arbitrary. It means nothing. It teaches nothing, but it's the truth. You know, the things that I teach all teach us what we're supposed to do now, you know, to have world peace. So the apostasy happened in 1975. So Herbert Armstrong proved that you know, what the true church of the Bible is supposed to be. But then he said, and this thing that will happen in 1975. Then when it didn't happen, he lost all his followers, and that's when the apostasy happened, you know. And Herbert Armstrong kept preaching after that, but he lost most of his followers, and everything fell apart, and people took some of his teachings and taught him the ones they everybody just kind of cherry picked what was Mr. Armstrong's teachings, and kind of started their own branch off from there, and you know, which is what there's other scriptures. It's not just this one. There's a you know, 7 or 8 or something like that scriptures that talk about this apostasy that would need to happen, and that would need to happen first. Of course, Selassie opened the first 6 seals, and the 7th seal isn't in the 7th chapter of Revelations, but like the 1st or 2nd verse something of the 8th chapter, you know, and it talks about all this stuff that's happened because the apostasy started in 1975. Selassie disappeared from heaven. I mean, disappeared from Earth, from history, and then we're all left to interpret it and pick the pieces up and try to decide what it all means. He came and went like a thief in the night. And the reason that's important is because if that wouldn't have happened, then we would all be saying, now what should we do, Selassie? Hey, now what should we do? And, you know, do you believe it's okay for there to be transgender people? Do you believe that it's okay for there to be gay people? Do gay people exist? You know, what do you think? You know, and that's not the point. We're supposed to, you know, wouldn't be learning from history. That's what we've been doing wrong all along, is we've been needing the church and the government to tell us what to think and everything. Most of that stuff's arbitrary and it doesn't matter, and there should be freedom of choice, freedom of religion, freedom of belief, so that people can decide for themselves, even if they're wrong, even if it's a different version of the truth, you know, because policing morality is a dumb idea. So there would need to be, you can see why there would need to be an apostasy first, why this time needs to happen, You know, like Selassie I mentioned when he went to Jamaica and opened the fifth seal, that there needs to be more things that happen, you know? So, you can read Herbert Armstrong's book about how the church has always been in sync with what he says it is, and that there would need to be an apostasy where, so that's the age of Philadelphia is like the when Selassie and Herbert Armstrong were doing their thing, and then we're in the age of Laodicea, which started in 1975. It'll be the age of Laodicea until the peace starts, and however that's going to happen. Obviously, it'll need to be some kind of UN type thing. So the age of Laodicea is the age of the apostasy.